Welcome to World Geostrategic Insight. My name is Ece Nur, and we have a very special guest, Mr. Andrew Leung, international China analyst based in Hong Kong. And this interview, we would like to address several questions on the current state and prospects of China's economy. Firstly, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Andrew Leung. Andrew Leung is a prominent international China specialist with 30-year career in many senior government positions in Hong Kong, including commerce, industry, banking, finance, social welfare, and overseas diplomatic representation, culminating as Hong Kong's official chief representative for the United Kingdom, 10 other EU member states in Central and Eastern Europe, plus a number of countries outside Europe, which is Russia, Norway, and Switzerland. Mr. Andrew is now a chairman of Andrew Leung International Consultant Limited, which was established and based in London, I guess. Since he relocated back to Hong Kong permanently in 2010, the company has since been reincorporated in Hong Kong, and he speaks regularly about China on international conferences, magazines, as well as English Channel International Television. Mr. Andrew, I would like to state my first question. As you may know, China's growth seems to be slowing down after double-digit growth in recent decades. According to government's annual work report, China has set its GDP growth target at around 5% for 2024, similar to the last year's figure, to be achieved through the upward trend of economic recovery, more fiscal stimulus, and monetary easing. However, according to forecasts recently published in recent months, major international investment banks expect China's economy to grow at a slower pace in 2024 compared to 2023. The average forecast of 5 firms, including Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, I guess, indicated real GDP growth of 4.6% this year, down from 5.2% in 2023. The IMF also stated that it expected Chinese growth to 4.6% in 2024 due to the persistent weakness in the housing market and subdued external demand. Late last year, rating agency Moody's even cut the outlook on China's sovereign rating to negative, citing risks from deepening the real estate crisis and a prolonged slowdown in growth. However, Chinese leaders maintain that the economy still has an enormous capacity for development and potential, and adding that it will remain a powerful engine of global growth. They also state even with this growth rate between 3% and 4%, China's economy will still grow much faster than USA and Europe, they state. However, the press, particularly the Western press, is full of worrying stories about Chinese economy. They usually point out China's rapid growth is over, Chinese data is manipulated, and Chinese financial crisis is looming, and that China will suffer a severe stagnation. Some foreign experts even talk about a possible collapse of the Chinese economy. Can you give us your opinion on the current state and the outlook of Chinese economy? What are the perspectives for the growth? Will the real estate market stabilize in 2024? Will deflation end in 2024? What will drive consumption? Will China's role in global supply chains change, in your opinion?
There's quite a bag full of negative realities facing China. There is no doubt that there are many headwinds, especially after the 2 years or you need 3 years of lockdown. And of course, the original intention was that China's economy would just suddenly jump up, immediately out of lockdown were cancelled. But of course, the realities happen otherwise, because apart from the recovery from the lockdown, there are also international headwinds. Not least is the United States all fronts aggression towards China imposing sanctions and trying to decouple or de-risk from China. And of course, that there is the perception that there is also a deflation happening in China, not least is the property market. So collapse. So there are a lot of negative things there, but I think that first of all, as far as the GDP growth is concerned, in spite of the rates you quoted from, including Goldman Sachs, only a couple of days ago, Goldman Sachs revised upwards its forecast for China from less than 5% to back to 5%, suggesting that there are some positive green shoots, at least, that the economy is recovering. Now, as far as the property market is concerned, of course, the property market accounts for nearly a third of the Chinese economy, and because of the years of laissez-faire and then high leverage borrowing, and then led to the burst of the bubble. But then the government, of course, came back on the scene very quickly, and then focusing on lending to the banks on completions. In other words, discouraging them from starting new housing projects. And just concentrating on fulfilling their obligations to borrowers as far as the properties are concerned. So we are seeing the rate of completion, the number of completions have exceeded the rate of new housing starts for the first time. Now, for the first time is very important, because in the past, before the houses were the flats were completed, they already started new ones and then keep on borrowing. But this trend has now been reversed. And so that is something to be borne in mind, because the government is 100% alive to the risks of a worsening housing bubble, but at least the situation has been reversed. Now, that another worry is of course about the slowing down of the Chinese economy, as you mentioned earlier. But then I think the first thing that we have got to realize, to borrow an example from investment, it is easy to make 10% if you have just $10. So 10% is making $1. But if you have 10 trillion, sort of even a few percentage points are very, very impressive. And that's why the largest economy in the world, the United States, has never been growing more than 2 or 3%. And China's even at over 4%. It's been doing reasonably well. Now, the question is, in future, whether it's going from bad to worse. And herein lies some sort of a fundamental strength of China. China's fundamental strength is not just if you talk about the economy, that's very simplistic, but the economy consists of many, many different things. And of course, the biggest, even though China is a mixed economy, unlike the United States, which is of course fully capitalistic, China is a mixed economy. But then even if China's a mixed economy, the private sector accounts for a significant proportion of China's economic growth. It accounts for 50% of China's tax revenue. So it's easy to remember. I mean, the Chinese are always very fond of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here is 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Account for 50% of China's tax revenue, 60% of China's GDP, 70% of China's investments. I'm talking about the private sector in China, okay? And then 80% of China's employment and 90% of the number of enterprises. So you can see 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and they are all driven by China's private sector. But it doesn't mean that the private sector is operating, with no holds bar kind of thing. Because if the private sector is not regulated, we see what happened during the financial crisis with a kind of subprime lending, and which led to the world financial crisis. So there is the mixed kind of situation in China. Secondly, if you look at the latest statistics highlighted by the Peterson Institute for International Economics by Nicholas Lardy, only a couple of days ago, he wrote an article in the Foreign Affairs debunking some of the myths about China's slowing growth. In fact, the heading is that China is still rising. Because if you look at the China's economy, a great deal of the so-called slower growth is driven by a number of important factors. The first factor is the vast difference between inflation and between the inflation rate, because the inflation rate in China is very, very low. But whereas the inflation rate in the United States is very, very high, driven by high interest rates. Now, if we have a low inflation, of course, prices are depressed, and that's translated into a lower GDP in terms of the money terms denominated in the US dollar. And of course, that the high interest rates in the United States, historically high interest rates, from 0.5% to 5% within a very, very short period of time, that drove a lot of capital flows from other parts of the world, including from China. So the idea that money is leaving China, yes, that there are some money leaving, but that's not the full story. A lot of the money flow is driven by this huge difference in interest rates. So adjusting for these kind of differences, according to Nicholas Nardi of the Peterson Institute for International Affairs, based in Washington, D.C., and China's growth actually during the last year, discounting this kind of difference in inflation, was even higher than the United States. If you take away all these distortions. So, but on the other hand, we have got to look at China's fundamentals. What are Chinese fundamentals? Because there is fear that people are not spending, and then there is a huge unemployment amongst the youth. But in fact, again, and then of course, as prices are not only rising, but they're deflating. So there is an act of deflation, a fear of deflation in China, leading to a deflationary spiral. But however, again, the IMF recently, just last week, again, they look at the kind of data, and IMF says the prices are picking up in China now. So I think that we're seeing some green shoots there. But what is more importantly, what are the fundamental competitiveness of China in this kind of situation? It may be hidden behind the scenes, not so, but nevertheless, they are very, very important. China's first strength is the fact that it's not only is the second largest economy, but it is become the largest trader for 128 countries around the world, compared with only 58 or 52 of the United States. So many, many more countries have China as the largest trading partner. And of course, China is also the world's largest manufacturer. That means that there is a very comprehensive supply and value chain in China built up so many years. When you look just, for example, the electric cars, apart from minerals, materials, components, and then also assembly, various the whole network of subcontracting, the body chassis, everything, China is fully developed. Nowhere else can compare with China. And that's why China has now become the new Detroit of electric cars, accounting for a very sizable proportion of the export. But we'll come back about the implications of that afterwards. But then but then coming back to China's fundamental strengths, apart from being at the center of the global supply and value chain, even though products are not marked made in China, China is embedded in it somewhere, either in terms of materials or components or logistics. The fact remains that the world's largest 7 container ports are based in China, including Hong Kong. And that's for a reason. If you lift these container ports and put them somewhere in Africa, it doesn't translate, So So China is now at the center, deeply entrenched in the global supply and value chain,
Mhm.
supported by the fact that 128 countries have launched China as the largest trading partner. This is unlikely to change in spite of any de-risking or decoupling, because it's simply not possible. Even if you look at any products, even the clothes you wear, the shoes you wear, all the appliances, China's embedded in it. The second
Exactly.
strength is China's both internal and external connectivity. Internal connectivity, if you look at China, look at the map, there are many powerful city clusters. In other words, big cities over 5 million, 10 million people, some of them several million people. They are connected in a cluster with some subsidiary cities, and these are called city clusters. And one cluster was around Shanghai, the other one was Beijing, and another cluster further inland, and even in the inland provinces. And then further down, you have the all the way down near Hong Kong, you have the Greater Bay Area, and then the Yangtze River basin and other cluster cities. So these cities are already highly connected with highways and motorways, but they are increasingly connected by China's high-speed rail, with a design speed of 300 kilometers an hour. And China's high-speed rail already exceeds the rest of the world combined, something like 45,000 kilometers more than the rest of the world combined. It is set to increase to 70,000 kilometers by the year 2035. Well, this is likely to drive up China's productivity, because if cities are, people traveling goods and services, it's bound to boost up China's productivity, regardless of the worsening demographics. All right. And then, so that's internal connectivity. External connectivity, I already mentioned about the container ports. But apart from container ports, you have the Belt and Road Initiative, including the digital Silk Road, with e-commerce reaching, in far off lands. And for example, China is selling its products to the Middle East, together with the highly efficient delivery systems. And then you can order something and delivered on your doorstep, together with its delivery systems, in a couple of days, even if you order thousands of miles away. And of course, China's e-commerce giants are legendary. So I think that there is connectivity there, apart from the infrastructural connectivity of the Belt and Road Initiative, including the Maritime Silk Road, including the Overland Silk Road, spanning from central China to Central Asia, across Russia to also to Central Asia, to Turkey and to Europe. And then there are high-speed trains, goods trains, all the way, even from the German cities, and even linking the UK through the channel, all the way to China's assembly points inside China. So China is highly connected internationally, internally and externally. So that's another strength which is unlikely to change anytime soon, or
Mhm.
unlikely to be decoupled entirely. Last but not least, the world is changing, deeply impacted by the so-called fourth and in fifth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence, and also big data, and the connectivity, including, of course, e-commerce, but of course, drones and robotics, and the fourth and fifth industrial revolution are set to redefine how people interact. And for example, we're doing Zoom
Yes,
now. We don't have to fly over to to Turkey to meet you. And then, of course, various other means of even using digital transmission,
exactly.
of the internet for medical services. So, but China is well positioned. Now, that's not what they say. It's what is supported by a deep piece of research by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, the ASPI. You can just Google that. They carry out a year-long research looking at over 2 million peer-reviewed papers at the PhD level. ASPI, Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And then they look at all the leading technologies, and they found, based on their research of over 2 million PhD peer review papers, that China is leading in 34 out of 37 out of 44 leading industries, including some aspects in artificial intelligence, big data, and so on. And this is driven by China's large reservoir of STEM. STEM means STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, PhDs. So China is something like, over 70,000 PhDs, compared with the United States, 44,000. So I think that there are some innate strengths there, but the sheer size of this human technological pool. So even though there are some bottlenecks and the stranglehold over semiconductors, but it's not entirely insurmountable. We look at how China built its space station from scratch. The United States so-called International Base Station, which was established over decades ago, excluded China from the very start, even though they partner with Russia even. But now this US led space station is near its useful life. China has built its space station from scratch. So China's got some real leading technological strengths. Not all, but quite impressive. And of course, China is the first nation that has sent an exploratory robot to the back of the moon. And no other country has been able to do that. So I think that this is another thing that underpins China's long-term trajectory. We are not there yet. I think that this year is stabilizing, and then, as I said, green shoots are happening according to the latest assessment by Goldman Sachs only a couple of days ago, saying that China's back to some 4%, 5%. But then the fact remains that according to the Peterson Institute for International Affairs, Nicholas Lardy, latest article in Foreign Affairs, China is likely to continue to contribute 30% to global growth in the coming decades. And he's warning the United States not to underestimate China as the second largest economy and a highly connected economy. And then all the productive forces are united under a unified leadership.
Okay, I would like to propose my second question then. Sorry, I just had to. Okay, so USA-China relations are often strained in recent years, as you may be aware, over issues such as technology, trade, and Beijing's position on Taiwan and in Indo-Pacific in general. However, Biden's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in San Francisco in November contributed to warming bilateral ties. Chinese Premier Li Qiang hosted USA Treasury Secretary in Beijing, and both agreed to cooperate despite the differences. However, Ms. Janet Yellen warned that China's huge subsidies to its industry could pose a risk to the global economy and called for a level playing field, especially for USA companies. Yellen accused China of disfavoring foreign firms in favor of its own, and she added that the United States has observed China pursuing unfair economic practices, including imposing barriers to entry for foreign firms and taking coercive actions against American firms. On the other side, Beijing considers the concerns about its extensive state support for industry to be unfounded, accusing the West of protectionism. what's your opinion on the prospects of USA-China economic relations and cooperation?
Well, first of all, again, everything is not in just black and white. When I talk to my foreign counterparts, I always like to use the analogy of different types of painting. For example, I like Monet. You know, Monet, the kind of impressionistic, semi-impressionistic painting, where nothing is in just black and white, as opposed to Caravaggio, which of course everything is very clearly defined. Of course, the world is a complex place, and there is no just a black and white answer. However, one has got to understand that China's economy is a mixed economy. It's a different political system, but highly effective in terms of delivering positive results for its people. Because according to recent studies, by the Harvard Kennedy School, the Ash Center report, which was out about 2 years ago, looking at how people around the world support their government. And China is amongst the top ranks, multiple ranks above the United States, because the United States is torn apart, by its internal politics, and without concrete results being seen in the improvement of people's livelihood, whereas the lives of the Chinese people have been dramatically transformed over the past 40 years. Of course, China is not a paradise. There are lots of weaknesses and lots of problems, but overall, it's seen as a very effective government delivering results. And after all, democracy is only a process. What counts is what's happening to the people, the large majority of the people, whether their lives have been significantly improved. And there, China scores a very high point. That's the first thing that a lot of the Western observers fail to realize. They think that there's only one formula that fits the whole world, one size fits all. How and then how you govern your family, how you raise your family should follow my way of raising my family. So this is a fallacy. The second fallacy, of course, is the China is now saying stealing intellectual property and being unfair to investors. Now, first of all, the kind of so-called intellectual property theft, and obviously, if you look in the early days in the Industrial Revolution, when the United Kingdom was the technological power, and the United States was just a budding country, and it imported or by whatever means various other technologies from Europe. And then in Europe, I always like to travel around Europe because I lived there for nearly over 10 years in London, and then back in the 80s, I was in Brussels. And so I travel around Europe quite a lot. Amongst other places, I went to Holland, the Delft, Delft, the blue porcelain in the Delft was imported from, or if you like, stolen from China in those days. Now, I'm not saying that China is doing the same, but of course that as we research, you rely on other people's research and then you improve on it, and that's what China has been doing. Secondly, and China has got a huge market, and then initially investors are willing to share their technology willingly. They're never forced because in exchange for a large market, so otherwise, why should China just open its market, for you to take the profits? Most of the profits of the foreign investors are made by foreign companies. If you look at an Apple phone, over 85% or 90% of the profits are made by the United States, the company, leaving only about 10% to cover their costs. Thirdly, I think that the competitiveness of China's products is not because of subsidies. It's, as I said in the beginning, is China's got a very complete supply and value chain. Everything is there, and if you go to Shenzhen, over about 2 or 3 hours by car, you can find all the kind of contractors or subcontractors which can meet international standards for any kind of new product you're thinking of producing. And then, of course, it's the whole supply value chain, including materials, including components, including logistics, container ports, linking China with the rest of the world. Nowhere else you can find this kind of efficiency. And this efficiency translates into relatively competitive, very competitive prices, plus the fact that China's wages are nothing compared with those in foreign countries. And so if you, and that's the whole philosophy of the so-called free economy of Adam Smith. Comparative advantages. Some countries are good at making wine, some countries are good at making cloth, and by exchange, both can get a benefit, and both is done voluntarily. So, but in any case, China has recently enacted legislation forbidding any kind of coercive methods for technology transfer, and it's also enacted legislation protecting intellectual property. That's because Chinese companies are now becoming more and more innovative. It is in their interest to protect intellectual property. Now, as for Ms. Yellen's recent visit, she highlighted the problem of overcapacity in China. So you hear this refrain about overcapacity. China's producing more and more than the rest of the world can consume. But then the fallacy is that, I mean, producing all this stuff, it takes money. It's incur costs. You know, if they can't sell to the rest of the world, why should they producing so much? And their competitiveness, as I said, is because China's efficiency, the supply and value chain, and everything is so well connected. And as for overcapacity, again, there is a recent data and issued by Reuters. You can Google that. It's called China's capacity utilization, right? And the heading is China's capacity utilization lags behind the United States and US race, but only slightly. Now I'm quoting this data. The United States capacity utilization, according to this Reuters report, which was only out about a couple of days ago, is dated 11th of April. Okay, a Reuters report. It's called China's capacity utilization, 11th of April. The United States capacity utilization is 78.9%. European Union, about the same, 78.8%. China, 75.9%, only slightly less. So the overcapacity mantra is a bit of an overhype. But then the fact remains that China's electric cars, all the stuff are very, very highly price competitive in terms of price and quality. However, if China's exporting too much, obviously has the effect of decimating a lot of the enterprises. And there, I think that both China and the European Union, various other countries could talk rather than fighting each other and mortal combat, because both sides, if they don't understand each other's dynamics, it's going to be a vicious spiral, which is not going to solve the problem.
So, well, my last question would be, according to many Western analysts, the new security laws, China's economic slowdown, and trade wars have tarnished Hong Kong's status as a financial gateway, causing an exodus of investors and challenging the city's autonomy. What's your opinion on that? Is Hong Kong's role as a gateway to China really over?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the national security law. The national security law was enacted by Beijing, first of all, after the huge disruption in Hong Kong in the year 2018, 2019, and then before then there was umbrella movement, and then especially 2019 when there actually the so-called black clad clothes in black the rioters, throwing petrol bombs, surrounding police headquarters, harassing policemen and their wives and children, and then ransacking the legislature. Went into the legislature and defacing the lot of the fittings and then holding the whole Hong Kong law and order to ransom. But what they're demanding is in contravention of Hong Kong's constitution, because Hong Kong's constitution prescribes Hong Kong as a special administrative region of China. The chief executive of the Hong Kong SAR, which is part of China, has got to work with and be trusted by Beijing because they have to interact with Beijing's overall policies as their motherland. But of course, China enjoyed a very high degree of autonomy in terms of its rule of law, in terms of its legal system, which is based on the British common law. Many international judges of high repute continue to sit on our court of final appeal, and then is still highly respected. Even after the enactment of the national security law. And of course, the appointment of special judges on national security law cases is not unique to Hong Kong. It also happens in the United Kingdom. And of course, in the United States, they never allow foreign lawyers to adjudicate on the national security law. So I think that there's a great deal of hyping, a great deal of twisting of facts about what's a situation in Hong Kong. But after the enactment of the national security law, Hong Kong is now stabilized and there is no more kind of riots. And Hong Kong is very well positioned to move forward. And then visitors are coming back because Hong Kong has got a lot of attractions. First of all, is the Pearl of the Orient, and it's got many. This harbor has got tremendous attraction. And then there are international events, including the latest Rugby 7, attracting a lot of international visitors. And then, of course, Hong Kong's cultural complex, the Palace Museum, the M Plus Museum is world class. And then recently hosting international forum, inviting the Louvre and other European museums, working on projects of cooperation. And last but not least, of course, Hong Kong is a very rich city. And then in terms of the ultra high net worth individual, ultra U, high H, net worth, and net worth NW. So ultra high net worth individuals. They are defined as those who can come up with cash, not property, forgetting about property, at any time of something like three, at least, I think 30 million US dollars, at least. And above, of course, those are very rich and come up with billions. But if you can come up with cash at any time, of 30 million US dollars, then you're classified as high net worth individual. According to this study, latest study, you can Google that, ultra high net worth individual. Hong Kong has got higher number of these wealthy people than New York City. In Hong Kong, there are about, I think, 14,000 of these individuals who come up with this money and above. New York is about 12,000. So that means that the wealth management services, the banking sector are very robust. So that's why many family offices are moving to Hong Kong. And then, of course, even the Middle East and China's broker a rapprochement in the Middle East, which changed the dynamics in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And of course, these countries are reinventing their economies. They've got money to invest, especially Saudi Arabia. They're coming to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is an international city. And so there's a great deal of a vibrancy in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, after all, also houses some of the world's leading universities, and there are more universities in Hong Kong ranked the top 100 or the top 50 compared with mainland China. So I think the Hong Kong is a great deal of attractions. Above all, the Beijing relies on Hong Kong to increase its global connectivity. I mentioned about connectivity earlier on, apart from the Belt and Road. And of course, Hong Kong is part of the Greater Bay Area, one of the largest Greater Bay areas in the world in terms of population, ahead of San Francisco. In terms of GDP, is pretty high, catching up to the very top. Above all, it's linked to the entire Greater Bay Area in south of Hong Kong, with all the big cities there. The Greater Bay Area population numbers about 70 million, connected by high-speed rail and the flow of people, ideas, and services. And Hong Kong, of course, is unique in terms of its legal system and under one country, two systems, on which China relies to further its global connectivity. And then even though in Hong Kong's basic law, Hong Kong's one country two systems is supposed to last to 2047, is already more than halfway. But Beijing recently came up with very positive statements and confirmed that Hong Kong's long-term usefulness to China would remain indefinitely. And so that is what makes Hong Kong tick. I think that with the national security law stabilizing the situation, and then with the younger generation being taught about the country, because for the past 30 years, they've lost their nationhood. Their education is not brought up with any knowledge of what's happening on the mainland China or China's history. Or they are studying only mathematics and physics and also engineering and that kind of thing, without any sense of nationhood. Now this is being corrected, but it takes time. But I think Hong Kong still have many strengths, unique in the world. Nowhere else you can see such a place where the East is the West, and not only in business, not only in commerce, but in arts and culture, big events, entertainment, travels, and yachting, sports, and many things going for it. But it's not all a bed of roses, and Hong Kong still has its challenges, like any other city, like any other country.
All right. So thank you so much. It was end of our on the end of my question. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and taking your time.
Okay.